What's going on, everyone? It's Talks Kenny here today. And this video you're going to check out is a clip from an interview I did talking about Florida's curriculum on Black history, slavery, reparations, and I'm giving some of my thoughts in this clip. I hope you guys enjoyed it and check it out. And don't forget to, I'm giving a shout out to Modern Josephus, who's the one who hosted this interview with me. Check out both his channels, the Modern Josephus, as I just mentioned earlier, and also his Christian Constitutional Conservative channel. I'll have them pop up throughout the video. I hope you guys enjoy this clip, and let's take a look. So I think there's a lot of history where I can, from my conservative perspective, I can show like, hey, even during the worst times in American history, there were people that were trying to unite us and try to be like, trying to unify us as one country. Because the complex thing about America history, and I think this is as unbiased, this is the most unbiased take I can take, is that America may have been oppressive to Black people, but America was also Black people's greatest liberators. And I think that's the stance I take. I think that's the more nuanced take, right? Without getting into, America was never a racist country, those arguments type of thing. So I think that's the most nuanced take in general, holistically, about American history. So, I mean, that's just my thoughts on it. How about, I think I got nothing to say after that. So.
I'm going to add to that, an example to that. And I want to get this last part, this other issue in too. But on that subject, whenever the American Revolution and the War for Independence is discussed, and I noticed this in the history series that I'm doing and pointing out how the liberals omit or ignore certain aspects of history, is that when they were talking about the War for Independence, they mentioned the slaves and how they didn't get any independence. But they didn't mention the hundreds of Black Americans, some freed, some who were free already, others who joined the independence, the Continental Army, in order to gain their freedom. They don't talk about them. And those Black Americans fought for independence, just like their white counterparts. They were working as well. They were feeling the brunt of taxation. They were feeling all those things, and they joined the Continental Army in order to defeat the British. There were like 2 or 3 regiments of Black, 3 regiments full of Black men who served in Rhode Island and kept the British from taking Newport. So they never discussed that. It's parts of history that they want to omit because they want to push a certain narrative, and so it makes it seem like all Black Americans were all slaves, but that is not true.
Yeah, and this is one of the, this is why I call 1619 revisionist history, is because if you look at it in the 1620s, the first slave owner, I think the first Black slave owner was a guy named Anthony Johnson, right? He used to be an indentured servant, just like Irish slaves were indentured servants, and he bought his way out of freedom, and he owned slaves. I think there's slave, though I forgot the number for Black slave owners, but I think there was like 5,000 Black slave owners that owned like 37,000 slaves, I believe, if I remember correctly.
So, yeah. So yeah, it was a big number. So
this idea that like slavery was like only something Black people experienced, when Africans own slaves, right? And at the end of the day, I always make this argument that if Africa, like if you go like first principles, you go to the very root cause of the problem. If Africa never sold their prisoners of war for a bottle of wine, none of them will be here in American soil, right? So this is some of the arguments I think I would like to put out there in the ether, is that if you want to make the idea that slavery was something uniquely to America, then you have to admit, as you go to your point earlier, that it was a human reality. Slavery was a human reality, right? India has slaves. Who else? Pretty much all around the world. Name me a country who never had slaves. You can't. America's the youngest country in the world. Like, we were like, 300, 200 years old? Other countries, China, Britain, they've been around for thousands of years. So you want to pick on the youngest country and say, oh, you're the reason slavery exists. And I think it's a very narrow and self-centered view of history. Like, it's just making it all about yourselves, instead of understanding the reality that slavery was a human sin, and that no country's like blameless in this, right? Even Indians own slaves. So to make slavery this thing where, because the common narrative is something that white people started, right? When in reality it's not. It's just been, it used to be, it's just like breathing. It used to be part of what everyday person of that time did, right? And I think it's a form of presentism. Like we judge things of the past based on the moral standards of today, when if we were born during those times, we would have seen it as normal, right? So I mean, that's just my take. I'm just trying to be as nuanced as I can about this stuff, because obviously people can bring up, like I said, anyone can bring up any instance, and they can paint anybody a bad guy, right? So I mean,
I like how you said that. I had never thought about that, how the U.S. was the youngest nation, and you're picking on the youngest nation for slavery when everyone else around them had slavery longer. That's a good point. I like that. What do you think about slavery being about race? Because as you mentioned, there were black slave owners. So how is it possible, if it is just totally about race, for black slave owners to own slaves, and these black slave owners are mingling in the society, and they're mingling among all the white slave owners, and they're trading, and they're doing all that with the white slave owners? Would you say that kind of takes away the narrative that it was just racist?
Well, I'll say yes and no, because for the most part, they knew, like, black slave owners was an exception, right? And it was part of this, and I think this is more true in the South, where it was predominantly Democratic run, right? That there was like a social hierarchy, and that's kind of what pushed racism in the forefront, right? Because there was the rich person, right, white, right? Then you had the poor white person, and then at the bottom of that social hierarchy, you had the slaves. So since most slaves were black, for the most part, all slaves in America were black. They kind of, it's almost stereotyping, pattern recognition. You associate, a slave, black man, whatever. The North may be a different story, but I think it wasn't exclusively race. I think race was a component of slavery. I think racism and slavery are two separate things. I don't think they're like one and the same, because even after slavery was abolished, racism existed still, right? Because they're seen as inferior or less than, right? And I one of the reasons I think also I'm just like, I have this thing against Democrats is that in some form of fashion, they're still practicing that same viewpoint on minority groups, that they're inferior, that they're incapable of test scores,
getting a voter ID.
Yeah, standardizing testing, right? You've seen, there's an interview I saw on one of the videos. Maybe I'll do a reaction video to that, where a guy asks, "Hey, is voting ID laws racist?" And all these white liberals saying, yes, black people don't have internet, they're not able to comprehend, it's complicated to get a voter ID. And the guy went to another part of New York, or I think it was Harlem, and he asked black people, "Do you know how to get an ID?" He was like, "Yeah, you just go to the DMV, whatever." And then he mentioned that, hey, like, some people think that black people can't get IDs, and they looked at him like, "Oh, those people must be racist," not knowing that the people who asked for that was who said those things were liberals. So liberals still have this, like, black people, minorities are inferior. And I think that's one of the reasons why leftism was never appealing to me as an individual, because I always found that condescending and revolting, in a way that you think less of me because of my skin color, instead of think of me as my equal. And that's one thing I noticed in conservative circles is they don't dumb things down. They're like, "Hey, you don't understand it, you rise to understand the standard. Like, you rise to the standard. We ain't gonna lower the standard to make you comfortable." And I think we need more of that in our country today, because I think for too long, I think we've been calling, like, black people, in a way, like, we make them comfortable in feeling the way they feel about themselves and these topics, that now we kind of bought into this narrative where you can't criticize their answers, right? You like, ask me a question I can't answer, not an answer I can't question. And when a black person gives an answer, if you question that answer, they want to label you a racist, right? And I think that's a very disingenuous way of trying to resolve these issues and actually trying to get to the heart of what is true and what is false. And I think playing these race games, right, using racism to justify racism, I don't think you're going to cure racism. I think you're just going to create more of it, right? You show me the incentives, I'll show you the outcome, right? So if I can dismiss your point because you happen to be a different ethnicity than me, then you just created more division, right? That was the end goal. You didn't prove him wrong. You didn't prove him right. You just said, oh, I don't consider your opinion valid, right? And some of the things, I get some of that too, because obviously I'm a first generation American. So a lot of African Americans will even make the claim that since I'm not a descendant of slaves, I can't speak about these issues. But then my argument to that is, if you want to disparage my country, because at the end of the day, I may not be a descendant of slaves, but I am an American. And if you're going to come here and tell me that my country is the worst place to be black at, then you need to go tell my parents, hey, they made a mistake immigrating here. But you ain't going to make that argument, right? Because you know this is the best place to be black, essentially, in the world, right? Yep. If a lot of these people disagree with the fact, revoke your citizenship, move to the motherland, whatever that motherland is for you, right? You can be from the Caribbeans, you can be from Africa, who knows where you could be from. But if you really believe this is the worst place to be black, vote with your feet, right? But, you know, that's why they say actions speak louder than the words. And I think a lot of these people, their actions proves otherwise, that, you know, their words don't really mean what it says. And I think that's incongruent of them to try to label this country racist when they don't seem to have no problem. You know, it just seems like they're just complaining because they don't get a specific outcome that they think they're entitled to. And I think that's a big problem in our culture today.
Yep. Well, they want them reparations.
Yeah, I mean, the reparations has been a consistent theme that's been appearing in American history, right? It all started with, I think, Abraham Lincoln, which was just, I believe, with Abraham Lincoln. Yep. He tried to he actually tried to compensate the actual people that actually experienced slavery, right? Yep. But then he got killed by a Democrat, you know, obviously, right? So the funny part about this whole reparations thing is that if you know history, you'll be like, damn, it's funny. Democrats stopped the reparations. Now they're now in 2023, they're here trying to push reparations. And I always found it funny, right? And if you look, like, some black people don't even know that Obama's a descendant of a slave owner. Kamala Harris is a descendant of a slave owner, right? But so I was like, yo, how are they gonna pay reparations? Like, it makes no sense to me whatsoever. Like, and the reason why I don't like the reparations argument to begin with is that you're penalizing a group of people that had nothing to do with slavery for a group of people that never suffered from slavery, right? And I always pointed out as you're extorting your ancestors' suffering for your own personal gain. That's how I like to encapsulate that. And I that's why I get a lot of hate. Like, honestly, I told you, like, this is why they come at me, call me a bunch of names, but I say, hey, you can call me all the names you want, but what I said, is it true or false? Because I always make the argument, if your ancestor was here and they were paying out reparations, would you get it or would he get it? And the argument is he would get it because he suffered through it. He got the whips. He picked the cotton, not you. You just grew up. You had your nice cell phone in your hand, right? You in AC unit. You wasn't suffering, but you want to claim this is the victimhood mentality that black conservatives or just conservatives hate, because we believe in self-determination, right? As a conservative, my motto is do for self. Government do nothing for me. That's Frederick Douglass was the one who brung that saying up. Hey, government do nothing for me, because he saw the government as, hey, you institutionalized slavery, right? You institutionalized black codes, right? Where I was saying before how I can make the argument that black codes showed that slavery, labor market regulation is rooted in slavery, right? That free speech restriction is rooted in slavery, because white mob in 1892 tried to censor anti-lynching Memphis newspaper, right? I could say, hey, censorship is rooted in slavery, right? I can play the narrative game too, and this is what I'm talking about. What's going on is this is just political prejudice. You want to push a certain narrative about, hey, this other side, they're the Nazis, they're this, you want to just label them. And that's what they're trying to do here with this thing. They're just trying to label the state, and then they're just trying to get a lot of people who this is the truth. A lot of people are not going to be informed and not going to do their own due diligence into validating whether certain statements are true or false. So the media knows this, and they're just going to perpetuate, hey, as long as we all stay on code, we all follow the script, majority of Americans will agree with us on this topic. And this is how the Don't Say Gay bill that's how the Parental Rights and Education bill got slandered as the Don't Say Gay bill, even though gay never appeared not one time at all in the legislation. This is how powerful narratives are. And I think until American people start wanting to do for themselves and start thinking for themselves, they're going to keep falling for media, I guess, propaganda, if I'm allowed to say that. But That's just my thoughts, man. I really can't stand this stuff. So
Yep.
So if you enjoyed that little clip from here's I'm gonna put it somewhere, but here's a suggestions for where the actual video is. Please go check out Mono Joseph's channel and subscribe to both his channels. I really do appreciate it if you guys at least check him out. I think he's giving some interesting content in regards to history and some of his personal thoughts about political issues. So I highly recommend his channel. I hope you guys enjoy his channel. I hope you guys enjoy this clip, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.